Greetings and salutations, folks. After trying out way too many shorts that promised me flawlessly flawed hair with like 7 seconds of effort, I'm here to tell you, I hate it. I want to do my hair once and then never again. Okay, at some point I'm gonna have to do something to my hair again. But I have these 3 headbands and this pile of synthetic hair and a Pinterest board full of historical hairstyles. And it can only get better. Just a little note about historical hair in general. Trends in hair were maybe even more fleeting than today, but most kept the hair well away from the face with the bulk of the hair bound in some way. Jewels, pearls, ribbons, and veils, hair could actually be much more ornate than clothing. Basically what I'm saying is that historical hair was lit. No struggle buns, you did not want to look like you woke up this way, you wanted to look like you sat in front of your servant for at least an hour. Appropriately, this is an area where loads of historians have done magnificent, nuanced, in-depth research to try to untangle the practical theory and determine how these hairstyles were achieved historically. In my preparation for this project, I've barely scratched the surface. I am not going for historical accuracy here. I'm not even going for historical accuracy adjacent. I'm going for historical whimsy that I can wear with my modern wardrobe and feel like a proper nerd as I make my way through the world. Okay, so I have 3 headbands here, and I think what I want to do for the first is something that can take me through a few different time periods, which is a taped hair braid. Taping your hair is just a really great way to kind of keep it up and out of your face without using a modern hair tie. And you can actually see evidence of this from the medieval period up through the Renaissance period and I guess into modern times, because why not? A braided hair headband is also not something that's novel. In fact, I could probably find one that's something close to my hair color. But in addition to this synthetic hair, I also have a not nasty, totally normal pile of my own hair that I've been collecting from my comb for the past couple of years. I mean, we're not fooling anyone with this. It's going to be on a headband base, but still, let's class it up. Once the foraged hair was done drying, I cut the synthetic hair to the same length and combed it all together. This is about a 20-80 blend of real to synthetic hair. I separated the hair into 3 chunks, 2 small and 1 large to make 3 separate braids. One by one, I clipped each chunk to the table, separated them further into 3 equal mini chunks, and braided. Since we're going for whimsy, I intertwined the larger and smaller braids. I sewed the hair to the fabric that covers the band. No grand technique here, I just basically prick stitched the hair and slid the needle through the fabric. Getting the needle through the fabric that had been adhered to the plastic internal structure of the band was not easy, but the result was a good, secure bond between the hair and the band. By the way, if you're thinking I would just hot glue that sucker and call it a day, you may be surprised to learn that hot glue will not glue hair to a headband. Ask me how I know. From what I can see in contemporary depictions, white was the most common colored hair tape, so I used this off-white mini twill tape I had on hand. No, twill tape is not historically accurate, but personally I love when twill tape, which is usually used in the internal tailoring of garments, is used prominently in designs. Little nod to deconstructionism. Plus I had this on hand, give me a break. I threaded the tape through this big, blunt knitter's needle. I drew the tape through the hair, trying to use the natural gaps in the braid rather than going through the braid strands. Many of the historical references I found were definitely not perfectly regular taping, and I find the irregular taping to be more interesting. I think as long as it's neat and, you know what? I did me, you do you. I finished this off by wrapping the ends with a grosgrain ribbon. I stuck some glue inside just to keep all the hair in place. Then wrapped what will be the end in grosgrain ribbon. I sewed the ribbon in place and sewed the edge of the ribbon to safely encase all the raw bits. So it's always nice to start off a project with a win, and I'd say this is a win. I mean, it doesn't match my hair 100%, but it's pretty close. And I also think that I can add like pearls or jewels or beads depending on the outfit, and maybe, if I'm feeling very involved, I may actually try taping my own hair one day and like making this a whole thing. We'll see. The next band will be a bit more involved. You may have noticed that I have a thing for the Italian Renaissance, despite the fact that it may be the furthest thing from my personal aesthetic. And there are some truly glorious hairstyles at this time and place. Some of these are religious or mythological, so the hairstyles may be more fantasy than normal everyday wear, but still. Various forms of hairnets or snoods, cauls, retinas, etc. were a common piece of the Renaissance hair puzzle, and they pop up at different times in different places. This kind of golden lattice look also carried over or down to the bust, and we can see a similar idea repeated in these partlets. Like taped braids, I think that this look is iconic enough that most people will get the Renaissance reference, even if it's just a subconscious connection. I created a very rudimentary pattern to have a flat reference throughout the process. These are silk velvet scraps that I pieced together, which are absolutely beautiful and a perfect Renaissance red. But beware the siren call of silk velvet, it is actual Hades to work with. I began by marking out a lattice pattern. This would have been better done after the next step, but I did it first. Hindsight. I will be attaching soutache to this velvet, so to stabilize this oddly shaped piece, I first basted it to a nice square piece of embroidery stabilizer. I then secured the whole thing in a large square hoop that is actually an embroidery machine hoop. There is a pretty fun netting technique, many in fact, that can be used to make historical hairnets. However, since this is going onto a headband, I chose to overlay gold soutache instead. Soutache likes to fray, so I taped before cutting to keep the ends nice and neat. I wove the soutache in and out to give the whole thing more texture. So it turns out this is less tear-away stabilizer, more meticulously and super carefully ease out of the seams stabilizer. I try to avoid gluing any sort of soft fashion item, but occasionally it's appropriate. I glued a small amount of felt padding to the headband to build it up a bit. I laid the soutache fabric on top of the padding and carefully pinned it in place. I pulled the edges around the headband and glued across the bottom, securing the fabric. Be careful, hot glue is essentially silicone, so a big lump of hot glue will create a big hard lump. I glued the other side, being super careful. I trimmed away all the excess fabric with thread snips, of all things. I covered the bottom with felt. The felt also gives the band some grip. Okay, this was a lot more difficult than I thought it was going to be, but I think it was worth it because I love the result. As I said, I love Renaissance fashion, but the more is more opulence can kind of clash with my personal style. I love this though. I think it's that like little unexpected extra that makes a clean, minimal outfit pop. Okay, so for this final headband, I want to do something super iconic. A French hood. Yes, I know that may be a controversial choice since many very popular Tudor movies and TV shows have shown a French hood as an actual headband with some sort of flimsy veil trailing behind or just a luscious blowout. I have to admit, because of this representation in popular media, I actually thought the French hood was a historical headband for quite a while. As it turns out, a French hood is just that, a hood. Frankly, I will never ever do this justice, but I will link a couple of great YouTube videos in the notes that do begin to do it justice. Suffice it to say, we don't know exactly how French hoods were made or exactly what the components were, but from looking at various portraits, I can see a white linen coif, a pleated frill or crepin, a colored cap, billements, those are the jeweled bits, and a hood, which is usually black, potentially with a veil at the back. Wikipedia and the Tudor tailor say there is a paste, or a hard sickle-shaped piece that goes over the crepin. It is easy to see why it would make sense for some type of stiff piece to be here, as these look like they're angled upwards, but from the side they're flat, so just some confusing perspective there. Anyway, since this is my grand finale, I guess, I want to make a couple of components for this one. First, I want to make a cap that kind of combines the coif and hood. I used the simple coif pattern from Tudor Tailor, which consists of 2 curved side pieces and a slightly less curved piece that goes down the top and back of the head. This is the same black velveteen I've used in 2 other projects on this channel, aka the black velveteen that keeps on giving. I sewed the side pieces to the centerpiece and repeated for the lining, which is off-white cotton sateen, another material from a project that will be coming out shortly. I pressed the edges using a spare piece of velvet pile to pile to make sure the velvet didn't crush. I attached a black silk ribbon to the ends of the chin strap so that they laid back against the velveteen, and placed the lining on top right side inward. I sewed along the edges and left a space at the nape of the neck. I trimmed around the curved edges and turned the whole thing right side out. For the actual headband portion of the faux hood, I began by covering the headband in the same cotton sateen as the cap lining using a schoolhouse glue stick and sewing clips. I can't guarantee this would hold up over time, but this was eventually reinforced, so longevity wasn't a concern. I then pulled each side of the fabric over the edge of the band and glued it to the underside. Once everything was dry, which was super quick, I trimmed away all the excess fabric. I capped off the band with an edging of gold billements, or just brass beads, which apparently my camera wasn't too jazzed about. I first attached 8 or 9 beads at a time using a double-threaded needle, then couched between each bead with a second needle and thread. I finished the underside of the band with a strip of felt, again felled in place. Okay, so despite the fact that I made a toile, when I put the cap on, it just looked, yeah. So after a lot of fussing, I cut off the back and clean finished the back edge. I then sewed pearls and brass beads to the top of the back edge using the same technique I used for the first set of brass beads. Okay, so here it is. We did it, we got there. This kind of went off the rails a little bit, right? Like this wasn't exactly what I expected this particular headband to look like, but I kind of love it. Honestly though, I feel like one of my takeaways from working in the fashion industry, sorry, I can't like hear this thing, it's very muffling. One thing I didn't realize is that the French hood is kind of like the original clean girl aesthetic. Like their hair is perfectly parted in the middle and then it kind of like goes over their ears. It's very precise and very perfect, and I don't think I appreciated that going into this. So I think that one of the main things that I learned from working in the fashion industry has been like that fine line between perseverance and learning when to call it when something just isn't working, and being flexible to let something kind of go in a different path than what you expected. And that's definitely what happened with this hood. I think that there's a couple of different ways that you can wear this. You can wear it in a way that's a more direct homage to a historical method, but then there's also the Hollywood version. Whether you love adding explicit references to historical fashion when you get dressed, or take a more subtle approach, I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, feel free to give it a thumbs up and hit subscribe to join me on similar adventures in historical, vintage, and modern fashion. Bye! Save that for later.